The Mikko Rantanen trade shook up the entire NHL. How will it affect the Avalanche and the Hurricanes? We break that down. Plus, the San Jose Sharks look to continue their rebuild as we approach the trade deadline. All that and more on today's Locked On NHL podcast.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Gil Martin here, and welcome everybody to the Monday edition of the Locked On NHL podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On NHL your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts so you get new episodes as soon as they drop. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Super Bowl 59 is here, and there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. New customers can bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. It is my pleasure to welcome back to the show the host of Locked On Carolina Hurricanes, Zach Martin, and not a dull weekend here for the Hurricanes. They make a big splash, adding Mikko Rantanen, Taylor Hall, two big additions to this team. And let's start with the obvious. What is the immediate impact that these two additions will have on this team?
First, as always, thank you for the invite, Gil. Always fun to talk hockey with you. If you're looking at the impact of what this means, well, in my opinion, you're getting a top 5 NHL player in the entire league in Mikko Rantanen. I mean, you're a guy who's gotten back-to-back 100-point seasons. He's on pace for his third, definitely on pace for his fourth straight 90-plus season. I mean, a guy who's been in, top 10 Hart conversations for the last 2 years, Stanley Cup champion. We can just keep rallying off what this guy has already done, and he's only, I think, 28 years old. So you are getting – everyone keeps saying, well, the Hurricanes don't have superstars. The Hurricanes don't have superstars. Well, you got your superstar. Yes, he's on an expiring contract, but if you listen to what Eric Tolsky said last night on the broadcast or just in general, they know it's going to take a little bit of a time to get that figured out. But initially, I mean, you're getting a guy who's, your cornerstone franchise-altering player. You've changed the landscape of basically the entire league, because now it's like, oh, okay, now the Hurricanes have got one of their top dudes. And that's not even talking about for the fact you also have Andrei Svechnikov, Sebastian Aho, and Seth Jarvis on the same roster as well, along with Jacob Slavin on the defense. I mean, you basically just took the Hurricanes, who are already the second best team in the Eastern Conference right now behind the Washington Capitals in terms of points, and now you just injected it with so much additional play off of this guy. You're talking one of the best power forwards in the league right now that, uses his body well. He has a lethal shot, basically can score wherever and set up his teammates. Oh, and you also got Taylor Hall, which is not even it's just a whatever addition. No, you're talking a first overall pick from 2010 drafts. You're talking also a MVP who was with the New Jersey Devils, a guy who's got well over 700 points in 800 something games. So you got a guy who's no slouch. Yes, it's his 7th NHL team, but you're still talking about a guy who's been in the league for 15 seasons, bringing some veteran presence. Maybe won't put the scoring like he used to, but it's still a guy who can get 50 points a season, really. And that's another nice addition, too. And the crazy part of this trade is, Gil, the Hurricanes gave up no first-rounders, and they gave up no top prospects. And that's talking about getting those two guys. And if you go back to the Jake Gensel deal, same thing. No first-rounders, no top prospects. That's some high injection without giving up your future for these two guys. And it's a massive impact already. And we saw it last night against the Islanders, which we'll talk about here in a bit. But yeah, talk about an instant boost on this roster.
No doubt about that. Do you have a concern about these additions? Something that, maybe about their game that may not fit with the Hurricane style, or is it the fact that there is an expiring contract on Rantanen? What concerns you about this deal?
I know a lot of people are concerned because they keep talking about the Jake Gensel deal from last year, like how they traded for him and he didn't sign. And for me, it's a completely different thing because you look at the fact that the Hurricanes did meet his asking price of $8 million, but then Tampa's like, we'll give you one last year for $1 million more, and it's in Florida, which is state taxes are completely different down there. So the Hurricanes lost out on that, even though they met his ask. But this is completely different, though. And you've listened to Eric Tulsky because he was on the broadcast last night on FanDuel, is that the Hurricanes are going to have almost $40 million in cap space because you got a lot of contracts coming off the books. Talking about Dmitry Orlov, Brent Burns, Frederick Anderson, Jesper Fost. Even Jack Rossovic's deal, and the fact that the cap's going up to maybe $93 to $97 million. So you're getting an instant boost of all this additional money. And they've even said too, like they're going to, they've already had initial talks. They're going to see how, give it a few weeks and see how everyone's feeling because they know it's a process because he's been with Colorado for over a decade. Now you're coming into a team. So it's like, you're not going to be like, oh, hey, let's give you a contract. No, they're going to play this out smartly. And that's the big difference from what Tulsky said compared to last season where they had a nickel and dime up to the cap. Now they're going to have so much additional money that Mikko Rantanen's asking for 14. I don't see why the Hurricanes won't give him 14. And the thing, too, with that, Gil, is the Hurricanes have never paid anyone over $10 million in their entire history. This will be the first guy to do it. And honestly, not a bad guy to pick to give your first ever $10+ million deal to. So am I concerned? It's not 0, but it's less than 1, if that makes sense. I feel really good about this to where I think the Hurricanes can make this work. And also, too, he's got his best friend in Sebastian Aho on this team. So that's going to be an instant boost of making that work. And you also have the other Finns of Juha Jaska, Jesperi Kotkaniemi, and of course, as everyone jokes about it, the adopted Finn in Sebastian Aho because he went with those guys over the summer to Aho's wedding over in Finland. So I'm not really concerned in terms of that. And I think it's a deal that makes sense because now you've instantly boosted your team. And I really don't see as like I said, it's not 0, but it's less than 1 of this contract getting figured out. It's going to take time because you got a guy who's never been here before. And in terms of fit, from what Tulsky's been saying, that Mikko Rantanen fits perfectly into this team because you look at a team that's built on Jordan Stahl's like big body presence where, they use the big body to play defense, but can transition to offense. And that's what Mikko Rantanen is. He can use his body because he's a big power forward type player, but he's also got a lethal shot. So you're just adding on to what already is a good skill set. And now you just made it even better because now it's going to fit the system to where it's still a good 200-foot game, but still letting him be himself and being the guy that they traded for. So fit. It's just going to take a little bit because that's just for everyone. And you're talking, it takes a long time for the defense to get fit. But even with these guys too, like you're talking about a completely different system to Colorado where it's open running gun type style to where maybe they slow it down a little bit more. But I think it's a big body system with forechecking, transition game, and structured play where I still think it fits in well. First game in for Rantanen, I think he had a block shot, 5 shots already in the game, and already had like 23 shifts in almost 19 minutes of ice time. And he's on the power play 1 unit. So like he's already there was times, you watch the game, there was 3-5 chances where he could have scored. It's just the post was in the way, or it's one of those things where you already felt an impact game 1. And that's with no practice, which is kind of crazy to think about.
Is there a player or two you think who benefits the most from this trade, and maybe a player or two who you think will actually see a negative impact on their individual statistics as a result of this trade?
I would definitely say a guy who's going to get impacted is Sebastian Aho because, best friends with Mikko Rantanen. They play together, through a lot of World Junior teams and stuff like that and World teams as well. And, of course, they're going to be teammates in the 4 Nations coming up. So I think that's going to be an instant boost right there on that line because – yeah, you've had Andrei Svechnikov. You got that, chemistry with Seth Jarvis as well. But you get a guy like Mikko Rantanen on your line. Yeah, I think you'll be feeling pretty good about that, especially if you're scoring goals, but also being able to facilitate a guy who's going to be able to be a consistent player every night who might have a goal. A guy who could score every night, really. And if not, you could still have a guy who's going to be a good facilitator to get you some assists as well. Other guys, Seth Jarvis, just very Kotkaniemi. There's a lot of guys like that first power play unit. It's Shane Gostisbehere, Jarvis, Aho, Rantanen, and Svechnikov. That first power play unit, it's just going to be how do you really stop that essentially? So that's going to be the one thing that's going to be kind of crazy to figure out. And then negative impact. I mean, luckily for Rod Brindamore, he kind of like sets his lines up to where it's still kind of even for the most part. So you're not really losing a diminished set of ice time, but maybe it's a Andrei Svechnikov who's, kind of been on the first line a little bit recently. Maybe it's going to see more of the second line, but I mean, in terms of overall, I don't really see a whole lot of impact that's going to take someone's game completely away. It's just, we're going to have you on a different line compared to usual just because it's Mikko Rantanen on your first line now. So, but I don't think it's going to be a super huge negative impact on any guy per se. I see it's mostly a lot of good impact, essentially. Yeah.
Do you think the Canes are done, or are there more moves between now and the trade deadline?
I'll call Eric Tulsky again. He said, we have 6 weeks to do some more additions. So, no, I think there's going to be a lot more bag of tricks up the sleeve for the Carolina Hurricanes because they have some good draft capital. And there you have stockpiled a lot of good prospects as well. So if they really want to go out there and get something, I think they will. Is there a possible deal for a second line center? Possibly. I mean, yeah, right now you got Jesperi Kotkaniemi, Jordan Stahl, and Juha Jaska, but I mean, there's never a bad thing when you're like, okay, is there someone available that we can still get as a second line center that I know everyone keeps talking about JT Miller, but maybe there's someone else that we don't know about. Because, I mean, no one really knew about this deal, even though it's been going on since last summer, and it really kicked into gear 6 weeks ago, then over the last 36 hours. So no one even knew this trade has been kind of slowly been working since the offseason, and now it's okay. No one thought that, it's Carolina and Colorado. It's been like Vancouver, and Vancouver, and it's like, no, here's Colorado. And I think that maybe there could be because the thing with Eric Tulsky is he calls around to everyone around the league. It's not just one team here, one team here. It's like he's perusing around saying, hey, how are you feeling? What certain guys can we go for? Like what trades are doable? So he does his due diligence, and I think there's probably a team where you're not even thinking about that maybe they're in for that's not a Miller or a Pedersen. Maybe it's someone on a different team that's kind of like a dark horse that maybe is off everyone's radar. And that's the thing with this is your first big trade in the Tulsky era. And it is probably one of the biggest in Hurricanes history, that's for sure. So long answer to say, no, they're not done. I would not be surprised if we see something else before the deadline because we are still 6 weeks away. Anything can happen right now under this new regime with Tulsky at the helm.
All right, Zach, why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they could find the podcast and where they could find you on social media?
Yeah, of course. Locked on Hurricanes on all podcast platforms, and we're also on YouTube as well. So, subscribe, hit the bell notification, share it, all that good stuff. So you don't have to miss any good thing. So like I said, also on social media, it's LO_Hurricanes on Twitter, X, however you want to call it. For me, I'm at One True Zach on X. I'm also at the Zachary Martin on Blue Sky as well. So yeah, you can check out the podcast all over there and stuff like that. Like I said, on all the platforms and on YouTube and all that good stuff.
All right, Zach, thanks so much.
Hey, thanks, Gil. Appreciate it.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Super Bowl 59 is here. One game, two teams, endless possibilities. And there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or even betting on the coin toss, FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action. With live betting all game long, you can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. The live betting feature lets you stay involved no matter what happens on the field, and the app is super easy to navigate. Plus, knowing that you can place a $5 bet and potentially win $200 in bonus bets for the Super Bowl, that's the icing on the cake. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Just bet $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. FanDuel.com, bet with FanDuel, official partner of Super Bowl 59. It is my pleasure to welcome back to the show Shaggy Von Doom himself, Kyle Sullivan. Never a dull moment in Denver for the Colorado Avalanche. Mikko Rantanen traded, shocking a lot of people. He is now a member of the Carolina Hurricanes. A decent return, but certainly not equal to Mikko Rantanen on paper. Your initial thoughts about this trade, were you as surprised as everyone else?
Yeah, and me and my co-host Chris Maselli over on Lockdown Avalanche, this has been something that's you've heard the rumbles for a couple weeks now, and we've both kind of come to the same conclusion. How in the world do you trade Mikko Rantanen? He's going for his third or fourth year in a row with 100 points. Like, we're now in the age of the NHL where a 100-point player is something you just look at blasé. This is something expected now, where that used to be an incredible mark coming in the early 2010s. But the Avalanche managed to trade him away, which is interesting. And if you're looking for answers, you're not going to find it until probably the end of the season. Why this happened? It seems to keep coming around to a contract issue because Mikko Rantanen is a UFA at the end of the year. Seemed like there were the Avalanche side and his agent. There was apparently a canyon in between that number. And with Nathan MacKinnon for about 2 weeks being the highest paid player in the NHL, with that mark that he set, it sounded like they did not want to go over Nathan MacKinnon money, especially knowing Cale Makar is coming up at some point. They did not want to set the precedent way too high. And it sounds like that agent, who is also the same agent for Leon Draisaitl, wanted Leon Draisaitl money for Mikko Rantanen, which, for the record, he deserves. He is that good of a player. But Nathan MacKinnon, for years, took a hometown discount to stay in Colorado. You were kind of expecting something similar with Mikko, and it sounded like there was just no ground to be made up between the two sides. So the Avalanche, instead of coming away with nothing, traded him away for Marty Necas and Jack Drury.
So your thoughts on Necas and Drury, where do they fit in with the Avalanche, and what can they add to this attack here?
Now, in the 2 games that I've witnessed both of their contributions to the team, you can already see the spark. Drury, his uncle used to play for the Colorado Avalanche back in the day, so there's a bond there. Fans have resonated with that, and he's wearing the same 18. So everybody get that number out of your closet. That jersey is good to wear again. Necas, I'm interested. He's in this recent game against the Rangers, he hit the post probably 4 or 5 times, but he is firing that puck. He looks comfortable. And with Nathan MacKinnon, he's on the same line with Nathan MacKinnon. I like to see what that duo can look like once they can really figure out how they play. When you're comparing against Mikko Rantanen, how he played, there's a 200-foot game that Necas brings that Mikko has kind of given up on. Mikko, his nickname in Colorado was the Moose, and he plays like a moose, and he'll play when he wants to. He'll contribute when he wants to. He is one of the best players in the NHL. Most nights, he'll give you a shift here or there. He'll just kind of go through the game. That's what you get. Necas, I don't know if this is because it's new, wanting to prove himself, but he is electric, and he is really making some contributions on that power play that has been abysmal for the Avalanche as of late. He has really jolted some life in that power play.
What do you think the Avalanche will miss most about Mikko Rantanen? Not just the points, but just as a guy in the locker room, as a member of the team.
He is a goofy guy. He's one, he's homegrown. The Avalanche went out and they drafted him. He's one of there's that fondness for those guys that they drafted, like Gabe Landeskog, Nathan MacKinnon, Cale Makar. The guys that they drafted stuck with the team during 16, 17, the dark years where the team was abysmal and didn't go away like Matt Duchene. They stuck around and trusted the process, and they were awarded a Stanley Cup in 2022. There's a fondness for those guys that they felt like they were the Colorado Avalanche. And now it's crazy to think that the time of lifting the cup was the last time you would see Rantanen, MacKinnon, and Landeskog all together at the same time. And he was such a goofy presence. He's funny. He's very personable. He's always giving you a good soundbite. He was an energy guy, and he was a really good buddy to Gabe Landeskog, the captain for the Avalanche. So, yeah, you're going to miss one of the pillars of what you know as the current Avalanche. It would not be built without Mikko Rantanen.
You mentioned Gabriel Landeskog. Any hope that he's back this season or anytime in the near future?
You could take any clip that we have talked about Gabe Landeskog in the last 3 years and insert it right here, and it would be just as true as it was 3 years ago. There is Chris McFarland, general manager for the Colorado Avalanche, said in the talks of the Mikko Rantanen trade, when asked about Landeskog, he said, there is no timeline on the horizon in the near future. That's wonderful. That's what we've been hearing for quite some time. It seems like 2 steps forward, 1 steps back. And with this experimental knee reconstructive surgery that hasn't been attempted in the NHL, like, you don't really know the recovery time and what you can really do. So they're taking it extremely careful. And I don't know when we will see him, if it's going to be the playoffs or if at all.
Here we are, we're getting closer to Four Nations. Then you have like a 10-day break, and then maybe a few more weeks until the NHL trade deadline. Do you think the Avalanche will be active at the trade deadline? And if so, what are they willing to give up and what are they looking to add?
Well, see, that's one of the things that Chris McFarland, in his justification for making this move, was one of the things he said: this team is clearly not deep enough. If you want to go 4 rounds in the playoffs, this team has to get deeper. And with the caps of, you have Val Nichushkin still hanging out there, you have Gabe Landeskog's contract. There's a lot of contracts you have to juggle on this team. And with Mikko's contract kind of going away and Chicago retaining a big chunk of that in the trade, like, you have a little bit more cap room. Yes, you expect the Avs to be active because you don't feel like this is the final version of the team. And I feel like the timing of this move was the Avalanche forcing the league into a frenzy early, so you could see what's still out there, what the market looks like, and what would be available. Because as we mentioned on Locked On Avalanche with me and my co-host Chris Maselli, it's crazy that we were talking about a blockbuster trade on a Friday night, and it doesn't include any of the names that we've been hearing ad nauseum out of Vancouver.
So what do you think they're looking for at this point? You mentioned depth, but more forward help, more help on the blue line. What's the goal here?
I ideally, like, they have the goalie situation settled. Like, when we talked at the beginning of the year, where that was always a question mark, with Wedgwood and Blackwood, they are set, probably better than they have been since Waugh in net. Like, this is an incredible tandem. Goalie, check. It wouldn't hurt to probably add one more defenseman with some experience. You don't want to go too big. You don't want to go Zadorov big when it comes to, like, defense, because this Avalanche team is just so fast. And you don't want to go small. They have Sam Girard currently playing defense in Colorado, and he's usually the odd man out that everybody points to because he's so small. He kind of gets eclipsed in a lot of the plays that the Avalanche like to do. So I would expect maybe one more defenseman and maybe probably an additional winger, because you heard with Middlestat already in the lineup and what Necas could probably bring as a center, possibly, because he could play center, and they threw that out there. You don't know if he could be a 2-3C somewhere in there. An additional winger might help. And of course, if you listen to the show at any point in time, the rumor of Sidney Crosby to the Avs is probably, it's an everyday thing. So that's still on the table somewhere.
All right. Well, I know it will be an exciting few weeks coming up in Colorado, probably even the rest of the season. Why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they can find the podcast and where they can find you and your co-host on social media?
If you're looking for us, you can find us on Locked On Avalanche on YouTube. Just search and hit the little bell, follow us and like us. We're there. And you can find us on all social media. Just search Locked On Avalanche and we'll be right there.
All right. Kyle, thanks so much for joining us.
Always an honor, my friend.
It is my pleasure to welcome back to the show a familiar face and voice for Locked On NHL listeners and viewers, JD Young of Locked On Sharks. And JD, another losing streak right now for the Sharks. What is it, 6 in a row as we record this episode? But injuries, obviously, a big part of that. What are some of the reasons for this team's inconsistency and struggles as of late?
I think for the Sharks right now, it comes down to a lot to goaltending, right? Sharks, of course, traded Mackenzie Blackwood beginning of December. Askarov came in, the Sharks' future number 1 goalie that they traded for this offseason from the Preds. Looked great. Then he got sick, lost a lot of weight, and has not looked the same the last couple of games. Alexander Gorgiev, who the Sharks got from the Colorado Avalanche, as part of that deal, he has been dreadful lately. And then Vitek Vanacek, who took a puck to the face in mid-December, hasn't played since. So the goaltending issues have really been a big reason for the Sharks' struggle. And you compound that with a not good defensive group other than Jake Wallman. Like, this defense has really struggled to provide any sort of consistency. They struggle with just getting the puck out of their own zone. Those things compounded, bad defense and bad goaltending usually leads to a lot of losses. And the Sharks have now lost 6 in a row. So yeah, I think those are kind of the two big things right now for San Jose.
Talk to me about the injuries. I know they have been an issue for this team, especially on the blue line.
Yeah, it has been kind of a rotating cast. Jake Wallman missed about 7 games there, and since his return just hasn't quite looked Jake Wallman that we've seen from the beginning of the season, where he was easily the Sharks' best defenseman and is already set career highs and points for the Sharks. But Jan Rudo just went on IR. They've been having a kind of a rotating cast of guys kind of coming and going for them throughout the entire roster. But I think when Wallman kind of gets back to speed, hopefully we should start to see a little bit better performance because he is such a big piece of it. Shifting to the forward group, that's where you've seen a ton of injuries as of late. And it's mostly kind of bottom 6 guys for San Jose. But when you start kind of pulling more and more, then it really kind of tests your organizational depth. Nico Sturm, who's a huge guy, especially on the penalty kill, 4th line center, he's been out with the lower body injury. It isn't expected to be back for a couple weeks. Same thing with Clem Costin. Ty Dellandrea took a nasty hit last week against the Preds. He's out for a while now. And of course, Logan Couture, who's been out for the entire season. Again, it's just the bottom 6 here where the Sharks are now having to kind of start playing more AHL veteran type of guys, and it's just really testing their depth right here.
Talk to me about Macklin Celebrini. It's been great to watch him develop. Give me some good news here.
Celebrini has been amazing, of course. He's starting to continue to earn more and more of a bigger role with the Sharks. Started actually over the weekend playing on the penalty kill for the first time, where we see, of course, he's such a standout in the defensive end, especially at his age of 18. But Celebrini just continues to be Macklin Celebrini. He's been playing with Tyler Toffoli and William Eklund. That line has been the Sharks' best line over the past couple of weeks and has provided a bunch of offense for them. Celebrini now leading the NHL among rookies for goal scorers. And despite having played way less games than Matvei Michkov, I know the race right now is Lane Hudson is kind of the flavor du jour right now of Calder, and I know Dustin Wolf is getting some attention. I still think it's Celebrini's trophy to lose, and especially if he finishes strong. And if he's anywhere near a point per game as he is right now, I think it's gonna be really hard for voters to kind of ignore that, especially with how hard it is for 18-year-old players to be a point per game producer. So
how about some of the other young players, up and coming prospects? Give a Sharks fan some reason for hope here.
I think right now most Sharks fans are really, really excited about Will Smith. A couple weeks ago, he got benched versus the Wild. Just a poor performance, as you would expect from a 19-year-old kid, right? A couple turnovers led to goals for the Wild. Since then, he has really found his game. Sharks have played him with veteran Mikael Granlund and Fabian Zetterlund, and I think that line has really started to kind of produce lately. Will Smith currently on a 4-game point streak, has had 2 goals and 3 assists during that time, but you just see the confidence and with his game, and his playmaking is outstanding. And I think for him, it was learning what I got away with at Boston College, I can't always get away with in the NHL, but I think he's learning that balance of what can I get away with and what is going to make me a special player in the future. And he's starting to kind of find that balance, find his confidence. And he looks like he's going to have a really strong second half here for the Sharks.
We are starting to get closer to the trade deadline. I mean, we are still about 5-6 weeks away, but you've got that 4 Nations tournament in the middle, so you have a 10-day break. What do you expect the Sharks are going to do, and which players on the Sharks do you think will be made available at the trade deadline?
I think, it's a lot of the kind of usual names that we've heard from San Jose. I think Mikael Granlund is the big name available. He has 1 year left on his $5 million deal. Would be a perfect kind of third line center for a team looking to really add there. He's playing way more minutes for San Jose, but a guy who can play on the power play, play on the penalty kill, is a good facilitator, like solid in his own zone. I think Mikael Granlund is a guy that Sharks are going to have to make a decision on if they want to try to potentially extend him, or if they don't, I think it's going to be try to get what you can for him. You also have some of the defensive pieces like Cody Ceci, who's on the last year of his deal. He's third line pairing on most teams, but like a lot of playoff experience, is going to be solid in his own zone. He's a potential guy there for the Sharks to potentially move. Also, wouldn't be surprised if Mario Ferraro is available. He's got 2 years left on his $3.25 million deal, but the Sharks have made it known, like, if you blow us away with a deal, we're more than willing to to part with Mario Ferraro. So I wouldn't be surprised if he's available and if something happens, but I still think he probably still sticks around for the Sharks. So those are probably the big pieces that San Jose has left. They might move guys like Nico Sturm, who's going to be a solid fourth liner for a team who's good penalty killer, good on the draw. Nothing exciting like that, but I think their big move was Mackenzie Blackwood earlier this year.
And what do you think they're looking to get in return at this point?
I think it's continue to stockpile draft assets. They really had like a massive chest of pieces, draft pieces that they've used to pick players like Sam Dickinson and Igor Shimoleski. Like they've used a lot of their draft over the past couple years, but I think trying to kind of restock that, or guys who are getting close to making their NHL debut or making an NHL impact. Last year, they traded Anthony Duclair and they got Jack Thompson from the Lightning. He's a guy who's kind of played in the AHL, played some NHL games. Pieces like that who maybe are kind of blocked or don't have a pathway with their current teams, but on San Jose, we have plenty of opportunities to earn playing time. I think those are going to be the kind of moves that Mike Grier looks to do.
Well, JD, I know you'll cover this every step of the way between now and the end of the season. Why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they could find the podcast and where they could find you on social media?
Of course, you can find the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts and watch on YouTube as well. Follow the show, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram at Locked On Sharks. You can follow me on Twitter and Blue Sky at My Fry Hole. All
right, JD, thanks so much.
Always a pleasure, Gil.
Thank you for making Locked On NHL your first listen today. For your second listen, find Locked On Fantasy Hockey. Become a fantasy hockey expert and get the edge over your league mates with daily tips from Steal and Flip. Find Locked On Fantasy Hockey on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank my guests, Zach Martin of Locked On Hurricanes, Kyle Sullivan of Locked On Avalanche, and JD Young of Locked On Sharks for joining me today. I'm Gil Martin. I host the Monday edition of Locked On NHL, and I host the Friday edition along with Rachel Donner. Don't forget, we're here every day, Monday through Friday, bringing you the biggest stories from around the National Hockey League. So hit the subscribe button so you get new episodes as soon as they drop. Have a great day, everybody. Stay safe, and thank you for listening to and watching the Locked On NHL podcast.